Today, we're taking the Sony FX3 and completely rigging it out to make it truly worthy of that cinema line name. I've already done full rig builds for the A7S III, the original A7S, and many other cameras, some of which you may have seen, but there are going to be plenty of unique parts in this build and I'm excited to share them with you, so let's get started. So the first thing we always add is a 15mm base plate, and this one's from Small Rig. It's very simple and I've used it in tons of videos, but today I'm actually using a new one I picked up from Nicey Rig, and I like this one in particular because it actually has a full open slot here to put your 1/4-20 threads through, so that no matter how the threads line up on the bottom of your camera or your camera cage, you're definitely going to be able to get them into position. Because I found problems with this one, it has these individual holes and sometimes they don't actually line up with the cage, so I can't put two on there to prevent it from spinning. And I'm not actually going to attach this directly to the bottom of the camera, because then I can't remove the camera from the 15mm rods quickly if I want to. So I'm actually going to add a quick release to this base plate. And this one is a simple Arca Swiss quick release mount from Small Rig. And the first time you mount this, you have to remove these 4 screws so you can take this plate off to get underneath. Okay, now with the Arca Swiss quick release on here, I'm going to put this plate back on. All right, now let's get the cage on the camera, and this one's from Small Rig, and as you can see, it's a half cage. And I chose this one in particular because it still allows you to use the top handle with the 2 XLR inputs. Many of the other cages I found completely cover up that port, so you can't use the top handle, which pretty much defeats the whole point of the Sony FX3. So that's why we're using this one today. Now, one of the cool things about this cage is that it has a 15mm rod mount built right into it, so you can easily throw a follow focus onto it in a really minimalist way. It also comes with an HDMI clamp for that full-size HDMI to keep it in place, and then on the bottom it is Arca Swiss, so I don't have to attach another plate to the camera now to actually mount it onto the rig, because it's just built right into the cage. All right, now let's throw a lens on here, and I'm actually going to be adapting a Canon EF mount one. So what I have here is just a simple dead adapter. It doesn't give you any autofocus, image stabilization, or anything like that, because I will be using a fully manual lens. This is the Rokinon Cine DS 24mm lens. And the reason that I'm using a fully manual lens is because I want to show you how you can use a follow focus and treat this more like a cinema camera, where you'll be doing a lot of manual focusing. Yes, I know autofocus is incredible on this camera, and a lot of you are probably saying in the comments, why would you handicap such a good autofocus body with a manual lens? Well, sometimes a manual lens fits the project, and other times autofocus lenses fit the project. Now let's get the top handle on there, and this is the one that comes with the camera with the 2 full-size XLR inputs, and you have all your different adjustments for audio settings here on the side. This top handle is really what elevates this camera to the level of cinema line, in my opinion. The next thing we're going to add is this Small Rig extension for the top handle itself. So it makes it a little bit longer, more ergonomic to hold, and then it adds a few more mounts like a cold shoe mount here on the back and airy locating pins on the top. Now we're going to mount this piece of NATO rail that actually comes with this extension, so you have even more places to mount things on the top handle. There we go, definitely gives you a little bit more grip space for your hand, and it feels much more robust with these metal pieces. Now, one of my biggest issues with the Sony FX3 is that when you use the top handle, there's really not a great place to mount your monitor. And if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I love to mount my monitors directly in front of the top handle and keep it nice and low profile. But unfortunately, there's not a spot here in the front of the handle. There's no mounting points to put a monitor. And I'm hoping that Small Rig or someone else will design something that'll allow you to add a mounting point here in the front of the handle, so I can just put my monitor right out here. But unfortunately, that doesn't exist yet. I might 3D print something. I'm trying to come up with a design right now, But for the time being, I'm using this NATO rail little monitor mount, and it has NATO clamps on both sides. This tilts and swivels. So I'm gonna mount it to this NATO here. And I'm using the Atomos Ninja V, which is a 5-inch external monitor and recorder. So I can actually output full 4K ProRes RAW in 16-bit 422 to this and record it all here so we get the absolute most amount of dynamic range and color information out of this camera. And I already have an 8-sin cage on it with a NATO rail on the bottom, so I'm gonna get this clamped on. Like I said, this isn't my favorite place to mount a monitor on top of the handle like this, but it's the best thing I could come up with for the FX3, and I can just kind of tilt it into place here. So you see that you can still grip the top handle and see your monitor just fine. Now I do want to show you an alternative way to set this up if you don't need the XLR top handle, because sometimes you're doing a shoot and you just need B-roll, you're not rolling any audio. So let me take this off really quickly and show you that other setup. So with the small rig cage for the FX3, they also include this piece of NATO rail that fits into these holes where the top handle would normally go. And then with this additional NATO rail, I can mount any monitor that I want to with NATO rail or the area locating pins that are on top. And with this top handle, it has area locating pins in the front. So I can use this small rig monitor mount with the area locating pins and just put it here in the front. Personally, I love the look of this setup so much more with the top handle and monitor. But like I said, unfortunately, there's just not a way to mount it like this with the monitor in the front with this top handle. So let's get some 15mm rods on this, and I'm using some 6-inch ones, but you can use whatever length you need. Then we're using this 15mm hinge from Small Rig. I've shown it on the channel many times before. And then on the back, we have a little V-mount adapter, so you can easily throw a V-mount battery on there. And I really like this setup because it's just so minimal and light. And then I have these little 15mm rod couplers or adapters already in there, so I can attach it to the rods. Now let's get the V-mount battery on there, and I'm using this new one that I just bought from FX Lion, and it's called the Nano 1. This is a tiny V-mount battery. It is only 50 watt-hours, but it will power the Sony FX3 for about 2 hours continuously, so it does a really good job. Now I want to compare the size of this battery to two of my other V-mount batteries, and I thought this one was small. This is usually the one that I use that's very small, and it is a 99 watt-hour, so it is double the amount of power, but this thing is just that much smaller. It's about the same height, but you can see it's much thinner. And then we have this one from D&O, which is also 99 watt-hours, and it is much, much larger. So on top of having just a regular D-tap port here on the side, it has a couple ports across the top here. So we have USB-A, micro USB, and then USB-C power distribution, or PD. And that's one of the main reasons that I picked up this battery, because the FX3 really prefers a continuous USB-C input for power if you're not going to use a battery in it. And I know this for a couple reasons. I do have this Sony NPZ dummy battery that goes to D-tap, so I could plug it into any of these V-mount batteries. But the thing with the FX3 is on the battery door itself, they got rid of that tiny little hole for the cable to come out of on the FX3 and the A7S3, because I don't think they want you to use dummy batteries anymore, probably because too many people have fried their cameras with it, so they figured, hey, let's just get rid of that option altogether. But I have used this on the camera with no issues because it does have a power converter in it, so you get the right voltage for the camera itself. But I wanted to show you guys an alternative way to power the camera without the need for a dummy battery or a D-tap cable. So instead, this is going to be completely powered off of USB-C. Now, some of you may be saying, whoa, that V-mount battery is way too close to the LCD. I'm not going to be able to see any of my camera settings. Well, that's why it's on this hinge, so I can quickly loosen it up and just drop this completely out of the way. And then I can swing open my LCD. And if you want to, you could put the V-mount back in place, lock it down, and then see all of your camera settings. Next, we're gonna add a 4-inch 15mm rod for our focus motor to the top here. And I'm using the Tilta Nucleus Nano for our follow focus. Next, I'm gonna add this little adapter that goes from NATO rail to area rosette to the side of the cage here where there's also NATO rail. And the purpose of this little adapter is so that I can add the Tilta Nucleus side focus grip. And I absolutely love this thing, and it uses area rosette. So we'll screw this right into place. And then there's a micro USB out cable to supply power directly to the motor. And this focus handle runs off of a single Sony NPF battery. All right, there we go. Now I can pull focus without taking my hand off of the grip, and I'm doing it all with just a single index finger. And honestly, I absolutely love that. If you're doing handheld work, this thing is completely king and totally necessary for pulling focus on a manual lens when moving around. It's just so incredibly convenient and smooth. Now, I forgot to add the HDMI cable to the top monitor here, so what I'm using is just a basic full-size to full-size HDMI cable. We do need to put a basic quick release plate. This is a Manfrotto 502 on the bottom of the rig, so you can quickly slide it on and off of a tripod, slider, whatever it is. Now I'm actually going to use this microphone mount and throw a shotgun microphone in there. This is just the Rode NTG2. Now, if you've seen some of my other camera rig builds, you know that I don't usually put a shotgun microphone on my cameras because I prefer to use a lavalier or a boom mic. But for documentaries or other run and gun work, it can be useful to have. So in order to get this to hold in place nicely, I just have this little piece of rubber that I had laying around so that it's a nice tight fit and the microphone doesn't slide around. Then I'm using this short 18-inch XLR that I just bought that has a right angle on it so that it gets out of the way and doesn't actually shoot back too far towards this monitor. There you go. Now you have a full shotgun mic on the rig. And as you can see with all this stuff on top, it does look a little bit top heavy and strange because we have the focus motor, the XLRs, the big long mic, and of course the monitor on top. It's not my ultimate favorite way to rig something out, but with the FX3, you just have to get a little bit creative with how you mount things, especially the monitor, if you want to use the XLR top handle. As you probably already know, the FX3 is the only camera in the FX lineup that doesn't have variable ND filters built into it, which I wish it did, but I know that they had to keep this form factor nice and small. So I'm going to be using the Polar Pro Basecamp, which is a matte box that has a really nice filter system. You can use all different filters that drop in. They have this nice metal frame on them, so you never actually have to touch the glass. And then there's a polarizer built in here that you can spin this wheel and it will darken or lighten your image. And this is by far my favorite matte box setup. So I'm gonna get that mounted now with a quick step up ring. Boom, and just like that, this rig is done and it is looking so beautiful. Now, I always do this. I always do the shake test. So I'll show you that nothing's rattling, nothing's moving. It's a really, really solid setup. I just love that there are so many ways that you could use this rig. Of course, put your hand on there, another hand on the other side, and quickly pull focus, see everything that you're doing on this big, bright top monitor. And guys, I'll be posting footage that I shot with this rig very soon on the channel in my full review of the Sony FX3, its image quality and everything like that. So make sure that you're subscribed. And if you like the rig build or there's something that you would do differently, definitely leave a comment below and I'll be answering as many of them as I can. All right, I'll see you in the next video.